Hey everybody, it's Matthew. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at an article today about Spotify, and it is not a good one. This is a real bad look for these guys. They just seem to not be able to win these days, these old Spotify dudes. So let's take a look at it here and see what it says. Here we are. Spotify employees say it's promoting fake artists to produce royalty payments to real ones. And now on the surface that seems really bad, but what if I told you that it potentially actually gets worse than that? Now let's dive into this thing here and read what's going on. According to a shocking new book, Spotify has been promoting so-called ghost artists so it can avoid paying its piddling royalties to real artists. In an expert from Mood Machine, The Rise of Spotify and the Cost of the Perfect Playlist, published in Harper's Magazine, author Liz Pelly reveals that the streaming platform has a secretive internal program that prioritizes cheap and generic music. Dubbed Perfect Fit Content, or PFC for short, this program not only involved a network of affiliated production firms creating tons of low-budget stock music for their platform, but also a team of employees who surreptitiously placed tracks from those firms on Spotify's curated playlists. In doing so, Pelly wrote, they are effectively working to grow the percentage of total streams of music that is cheaper for the platform. Piloted in the mid-2010s, PFC reportedly became one of Spotify's biggest profitability schemes by 2017. As one former employee told the author, playlist editors and the streaming service began to see a new column on their dashboards soon after the program officially launched that, along with stats like plays, likes, and skip rates, would show how well each playlist they made worked with music commissioned to fit a certain playlist/mood with improved margins. Not long after the new column appeared on employee dashboards, managers began pushing their underlings to add PFC songs to the playlist that they were crafting for the platform. So it's a lot to dive into here. This is basically alleging that Spotify had a scheme where they were getting production firms and other people to create lots of lower budget music that they could fit into these playlists, therefore play them and not have to pay any royalties on them, because they would pay an upfront fee to basically own everything and all the rights to it. And so then the money doesn't have to be paid out because Spotify already owns the rights to the music on the playlist because they paid for it, which is a pretty crazy thing to do. But she's got word from Spotify employees about things that were going on. So that's a pretty damning thing to hear. And I like how they call it perfect fit content. Spotify loves to do this. They love to take weird things like this and spin it into some fun little thing. Perfect fit content, it's like, it sounds like, oh, they're getting music that's, quote, a perfect fit for the playlist or what people are after. And that sounds cool. But the way they're doing it is really shady and pretty uncool. And note that it says music commissioned to fit a certain playlist mood with improved margins. And with that, that just means they're improving the margins of the cost, i.e. the cost to make it is lower, so that means they get a bigger profit margin. But there's a few more things down here we got to look at so we can really dig in. Initially, they would give us links to stuff like, oh, it's no pressure for you to add it, but if you can, that would be great, the ex-Spotify employee told Pelly. Then it became more aggressive, like, oh, this is the style of music for in your playlist. If you try it and it works, then why not add it? Other former employees told the author that they wish they'd pushed back more against the pressure from higher-ups. As one put it, some of us really didn't feel good about what was happening. We didn't like that it was these two guys that normally write pop songs replacing swaths of artists across the board, the former Spotifyers said. It's just not fair, but it was like trying to stop a train that was already leaving. So they were pushing this really hard, so hard, in fact, that there was nothing they could do. And then we get to this part. As it became clearer and clearer that many of the company's then current editors were skeptical of the program, Spotify began bringing in new blood that didn't care about the ethics. By 2023, when Pelly was writing her book, the team overseeing the PFC model was responsible for several hundred playlists. Of those, more than 150 bearing titles like Deep Focus, Cocktail Jazz, and Morning Stretch were populated almost entirely by PFC content. To make matters worse, a jazz musician Pelly spoke to, who moonlighted as an ambient trap maker for one of Spotify's PFC partners, told her that he was offered an upfront fee of a few $100s and told he would not own the master rights. Because it was an easy gig, the musician composed a few tracks for the firm that were released under aliases on Spotify. After a few of the tracks began getting millions of streams, he realized he may have been ripped off. I'm selling my intellectual property for essentially peanuts, he told the writer. Perhaps the most offensive about this entire alleged scheme, which Spotify seems not to have commented on in the expert published by Harper's, is that the company is doing so to avoid paying infinitesimally small royalties to real artists that generally only make a fraction of a cent per stream. And down here, though Spotify has repeatedly denied that it creates music in-house and said that in 2017 such claims were category untrue, full stop. Daniel Ek tweeted earlier this year, we covered this as well, the cost of creating content is now close to zero, a bizarre statement to make for someone whose company claims to not be in the business of ghost artistry. So this is some wild stuff here. So we've got groups of these PFC partners, which I guess are companies or somebody that they're contracting with to make all these songs, and they've got tons of them that are getting put on Spotify. And what they're doing, like it said there, they're paying a very small upfront fee, relatively speaking, to get all of these tracks, and then those get put on there. Obviously, if these big firms involved with this, the number of songs might be pretty lucrative for them if they're making a lot of them, but for an individual musician, it may not be so great, because then when they go up and they start getting millions of plays just from people, you know, absent-mindedly tapping them and playing them for whatever purpose they might have, whether it's background music, whether it's workout music, study music, you know, whatever they're doing. They just want something to listen to while they're doing something else. They get all of these plays, and then it turns out that Spotify paid less to get the tracks made than they would have paid if somebody had uploaded these tracks themselves. Sounds real fun, doesn't it? So that's their logic. Is like, oh, if we can get millions of streams on this stuff, we can get our average listener numbers up, and that's better for looking for advertisers, so we get more money from that as well, and we're spending less to pay out royalties because, well, we paid up front to get the rights to all these songs and get them made so that the royalties don't have to go anywhere. And that's the thing. They prey on this guy, like the jazz musician down here, you know, they're preying on him. They're paying him a few $100s, and he's just making some ambient music, and he's like expecting it. Oh, this probably isn't a big deal. These are probably not going to be listened to that much. And then he turned out to be wrong in that, oh, if I had actually just made these myself and put them up there myself, then I would have actually made more money than what they paid me. But that's what happens when you sell the rights. Nothing you can do after that. I mean, it's just a shitty thing to do, to basically auto-generate music, essentially, even though that's not what they're doing. This is a step below AI. Basically just getting all these songs to play just because they're worried about paying artists, you know, a 20th of a cent per stream. Oh no, God forbid you do that. I guess that adds up maybe on millions of songs, you know, but like, it's just seeded to do that just for profit. Spotify's model, you know, is built on keeping people listening and keeping their average listener numbers up and all that stuff. And to maximize their profitability, they're just like, oh, let's just find a way where we don't have to pay the royalties. And then we win. And that's, of course, this is the kind of thing that happens when you over commercialize music, is it turns into making as much as possible while spending as little as possible. And it's as simple as that. Even though it's art and people have emotions tied up in that and all that thing, they're like, we don't care. We're going to manipulate everyone and it really sucks because people are making real art on the platform and putting it up. And these guys literally just don't care about the quality of anything. They just want, however we can keep people using the app and keep our costs down. That's what we're going to do. But it's like, imagine that though, you're paying already only a 20th of a cent per stream. And again, that's the high end for Spotify payouts. It's not always that good, and that's too big of a deal for you. So you're like, oh, we're gonna pay less money to get tracks made that are gonna get big streams because we hate artists, is essentially what you're saying. If they could, they would just, you know, not have to pay royalties at all and just keep music on the platform, which we're getting constantly closer to every day. Don't be surprised if a platform pops up that's all just generated music in the next 10 years or something. Who knows? Just so they don't have to pay anyone money for making the music. Think about it with me, like I just finished a song that I just submitted to distribution, you know, and it's like Spotify's basically saying like, oh, we don't care if your music is here. We don't want to pay you, so whatever. which stinks. Because the problem with that is with Spotify, it's such a big app. You need the discoverability if you want to be a viable artist. So you kind of have no choice but to put your music on there and just, you know, let it ride, even though you might hate doing it. It's like, it's got to be done for other reasons than the money that they're paying. It just really stinks. And I've said before, I am considering switching to YouTube music because all this stuff with Spotify has gotten really stupid and out of hand, and I just don't want to support their system anymore, especially if I can listen to the same stuff on YouTube music with the premium. And remember, with the premium on YouTube, they pay people more than Spotify does. If you are listening as a premium listener, those listens count for more. And then unpack the other thing he said, you know, earlier this year that we covered, when he said the cost of creating content is now close to zero. Now, we interpreted that one way already, but there's another way you can interpret this, which is that the cost of creating content is close to zero, he says, which means he probably would see it as less valuable, actually, and that could be a justification of like, oh, we don't have to pay people as much because it's cheaper for them to make their music, so they don't need to be paid as much. See, that's the logic you could go into behind closed doors, and that's nonsense, and that's really frustrating for him to say that he's literally potentially just justifying their actions by saying that he believes the cost of creation is so low that we don't need to pay people for the art they're making. Which is really sad because not everyone making the art, you know, has a full-time job on top of it to continue to support making their art, which is what a lot of independent artists have to do. You know, you have to have a job already to make it work in the reality of things. I really don't know what else to say. The article's pretty self-explanatory of how shitty this behavior is and the strategy is. So, you know, there's not a whole lot I really have to analyze about it. You guys could see for yourself how this is an issue. But anyway, guys, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this little talk here about Spotify and their usual shenanigans, leave a comment down below. As always, don't forget to click the bell so you know when a new video is out on the channel. And I'll see you guys next time in another video. Have a good one.